welcome to this episode of Innocence Lost, my Wrongful Conviction Series. And this is, as you can see from the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about Jerry Miller. He was exonerated by DNA after serving 25 years behind bars for a crime that he did not commit. So let's get into it. This I have on your screen here is the National Registry of Exonerations. So here is his story, Jerry Miller's. On April 23rd, 2007, Jerry Miller became the 200th person in the United States to be exonerated by DNA. He spent more than 24 years in prison and 1 year on parole for R that he did not commit. This is awful. Okay. So the crime occurred shortly after 9:30 p.m. on September 16, 1981, as a 44-year-old white female walked to her car on the roof deck of a garage near downtown Chicago. As she opened the car door, a black man pushed her into the car, beat, robbed, and R'd her. He then forced her into the trunk of the car and tried to drive out of the garage, but the garage cashier recognized the victim's car and told the driver to back up. When another cashier approached, the R'ist fled on foot, and garage employees freed the victim, who was later hospitalized. Doctors determined that the violent nature of the assault made it impossible to collect a R kit. Is it? How does that make it impossible? I don't know. Well, this was also back in 1981. They really didn't know a whole lot about DNA. So, however, they did find BLOOD and the reproductive fluids of a male on some of her clothing. I don't know if I can say that word. And these items were taken into custody as evidence. The victim informed the police that she was not certain she would be able to identify her assailant because she had been ordered to keep her eyes closed. However, both of the garage attendants provided descriptions of the driver of the car and worked with a police artist to create a composite sketch. A police officer who saw the sketch thought that it resembled Jerry Miller, who is the person that we are going to be talking about, whom an officer claimed to have seen several days earlier looking into the window of a parked car. So what? All right, so although 22-year-old Miller had no criminal record, he was arrested and put into a police lineup. So he was arrested first and then put into a lineup? How does that make sense? The two garage employees identified him as the man that they had seen jump out of the victim's car and flee. The victim failed to identify Miller from a photograph which she was shown in the hospital, but at trial she testified that he looked like the man who R'd her, although his facial hair was different. So then that should be a doubt right there. You should not be too sure. Anyways, during the jury trial, Miller and his father testified that they were watching a pay-per-view boxing match between Tommy Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard at the time of the crime. However, on October 1st, 1982, Miller was convicted of R, robbery, and aggravated battery, aggravated kidnapping, and sentenced to 49 years. So, even though he had an eyewitness that could corroborate his alibi because it was his dad, probably not a really strong one, but you could probably check their records of ordering a pay-per-view. I don't know. All right, so over the next 18 years, Miller lost all of his appeals. Finally, in 2005, the Innocence Project accepted his case and ordered DNA testing on one of the items collected from the crime scene, which is huge because, the fact that the Innocence Project takes on your case it says a whole lot. And, people saying, the whole Scott Peterson, because Innocence Project is taking on Scott Peterson, who is convicted of unaliving his wife Lacey and their unborn child Connor. However, there are gaping inconsistencies or pieces that were missed during the investigation and during the whole phase of whatever. I'm not going to get into the whole Scott Peterson thing, but the fact that the Innocence Project is taking on his case means something. And people are saying, well, it's the LA Innocence Project. It's not the Innocence Project. There's not the Innocence Project. There's many Innocence Projects all over. We have one in Chicago. There's one in New York. There's one in LA. There's multiple Innocence Projects. And they all have the same goal, which is to determine, first off, if they believe in a case, if they believe that someone is innocent and sitting in jail for a crime that they didn't do, then they take your case on. So just the fact alone that Innocence Project taking on a case like Jerry Miller or Scott Peterson, it's a big deal. It means something. It gives validity to the possibility that there might be something fishy going on there. That's all I'm saying. Because the Innocence Project finds those things and brings to light DNA that hadn't been tested like this. So in 2005, the Innocence Project took up his case. They started doing the DNA testing. While the DNA test was being performed, Miller was released on a very restrictive 3-year parole. Finally, on March 28, 2007, the results of the DNA testing excluded Miller, so it was not him, and it actually identified the actual perpetrator, which was Robert Weeks, who was already in prison on multiple crimes and other offenses similar to what he did here. So Weeks would not be prosecuted for the crime because the statute of limits had run out, which I think is just... Statutes of limits are garbage, I think. Anyways, if someone did a crime to me, I should be able to go after them regardless of the statute of limits, but whatever. That's my opinion, but I get why they're imposed. All right, so the Cook County State's Attorney's Office acknowledged Miller's innocence, and Governor Rod Blagojevich, who is in prison for his own crimes, granted him a pardon based on innocence. 3 years later, the city of Chicago settled a civil rights suit brought on by Miller for $6.3 million. Miller also was awarded $199,000 in state compensation. So, that is a condensed version of Jerry Miller's case. We're going to go back over here to the Innocence Project's website. And again, this is like the Innocence Project of New York, but they still put out other cases because they're interconnected in the fact that they all have the same goal to get people out of prison who are innocent. All right, so on April 23rd, 2007, Jerry Miller became the 200th person in the U.S. exonerated through DNA evidence. So, I mean, that's not a lot of people. 200 is, I mean, it's progress. But how many other people are sitting in prison that for crimes that they didn't commit? All right, so though he had been paroled a year earlier, Miller had spent more than 24 years in the Illinois prison system for an R that he did not commit. The crime. At 9:30 p.m. on September 16th, 1981, the victim walked to her car on the roof deck of a garage on Rush Street in downtown Chicago. As she opened the door, someone pushed her into the car. The man then beat her, took her money and gold chain from her. Then he brutally R'd her. He forced her into the trunk and began driving out of the parking structure. The parking lot cashier recognized the victim's car and was suspicious. So thank goodness for that person, because the victim might not be here today if the cashier hadn't intervened. She told the man to back up and went to get another employee. At that time, the man fled from the scene on foot. The two parking lot employees heard the victim yelling inside the trunk and were able to free her using a set of keys that were left on the floorboard. So the identification. When a Chicago Police Department officer saw the composite drawing and description of the perpetrator based on the memory of two garage attendants. So he's basing his memory off the memory of other people. And he thought that it looked like Jerry Miller, who he claimed he had seen several days before the crime looking into a window of a parked car, which is not a crime. Miller was arrested. This makes no sense to me, that he was just flat out arrested because he looked like the composite drawing, supposedly. Don't you need probable cause besides he looked like the memory of the people that saw him? I don't know. All right, so when the victim was initially questioned by the police, she said that she was not sure whether she could identify her assailant because he had instructed her to keep her eyes closed or he was going to end her life. While hospitalized, the victim was shown a photo array of young black men in their late teens or early 20s, but she was unable to positively identify her assailant. She did tentatively identify Miller at trial, saying, though, that his facial hair looked different. So I don't know if that's necessarily identifying him other than, or I don't know if she could actually, like, definitively say that that was him or just that it looked like the guy that she remembered him to look like. So Miller was identified in a lineup by both of the parking lot employees. The biological evidence, the wounds to the victim were such that a normal R kit could not be collected. I don't know how that's possible, but okay. However, the police were still able to collect the victim's clothing. Most importantly, they collected a slip that had some male biological fluid on the fringes. The defense. Miller and his father testified, like we already heard, that they were watching the Tommy Hearns versus Sugar Ray Leonard. But regardless, on October 1st, 1982, Miller was convicted of robbery, and kidnapping. Post-conviction, the Innocence Project took on Miller's case in 2005, and the Cook County Clerk's Office located the slip and sent it to the Strand Analytical Laboratory for DNA testing. After DNA testing excluded Miller, the Cook County State Attorney's Office joined the Innocence Project and the Cook County Public Defender's Office in a joint motion to vacate and dismiss Miller's conviction. The perpetrator's profile was also entered into the FBI convicted offender database. So CODIS, is that not CODIS, or does the FBI have a different one? Which implicated another man, Robert Weeks, as the true perpetrator in this case. Weeks is currently facing charges in other SA cases that he has been charged for, and like we read in the other one, he's not going to do time for this particular crime because the statute of limitations has run out, and that's why it's stupid, because you don't get justice, but whatever. So he was sentenced to 45 years for the crime, and he did nearly 25 of those years. And this was in Chicago, Illinois, which is dear to me because I'm in the Chicagoland area. So it happens everywhere. People can be wrongfully convicted anywhere, and it is so egregious, in my opinion, when it happens, and that's why we need to talk about it more and more. And here is a video of Jerry Miller talking about his experience, his exoneration. It's short, it's only 3 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. So, oh yeah, let me put that on. Here we go.
My name is Jerry Miller, and I was charged in 81 and convicted in 82 of a rape, robbery, and kidnapping charge that I was innocent of. I was exonerated in 2007, April 23rd. The victim never, till this day, ever accused me of a crime. And she said that she can identify the individual if he was walking down the street. She said she had been with him 30 minutes, but she never identified me as the person. I was identified by two other people who say that they saw me driving her car in the underground parking lot, and that I handed one of the eyewitnesses a parking ticket, but it wasn't me, you know. And that's what convicted me, their identification. The police had stopped me prior to the crime ever even existing. This crime that hadn't taken place, you know. And these same police that stopped me and took my address and name down, 7 days later came to my house. They said I was peering in cars, attempting to steal cars, and that was a lie. You know, that was, I guess, it was made up to give them reason. When I
Mm.
was arrested,
And we're seeing that happen a lot, where things might be totally exaggerated or even made up um, to bolster people's probable cause affidavits or motions, to bolster different motions within the court system. And we're seeing it in the cases that we're following now, that people do tell mistruths, untruths in their motions. And that includes law enforcement and prosecutors. And when you're trying to get your guy, you might make up some kind of, oh yeah, they were trying to break into cars. I saw him looking at inside a car, so he must have been breaking into it. No, there's no proof of that, and you didn't stop him at the time. You didn't ask him what he was doing, and there's no proof that he was going into cars. But the police just want to, in this case, get their guy, so they bolster their argument or their probable cause to get the person arrested. Maybe that's how they got him arrested in the first place, because it just doesn't make sense to me that he got arrested and then they put him in a lineup. And he was never questioned. Like, what happened in the investigation here? I don't understand. Well, anyways, sorry. Let's continue.
to the county jail, and you know, I couldn't believe that I was charged with anything, let alone, you know, this crime. I had just gotten out the army. I had got a job on the north side at a restaurant, and I found myself in a situation that I didn't understand even how it happened. All I knew was them people charged me, and I was like, what for? You know, why me? Even the guards, you know, who got to know me with, man, you in a bad situation, man, but, you know, just hang in there, keep fighting. But I just never stopped. I seemed like even after conviction, I would talk. But it seemed like eventually I realized I was wasting my time trying to convince someone that I was innocent, because they can't help me, you know. So I realized I must convince people who can help me, you know, lawyers with skills, lawyers who care. And that's what I did for a lot of years, just writing letters, hundreds of letters, hundreds. And I got responses from all of them, you know. And the response was no, you know. So I just kept writing, kept reading, kept bettering myself so I can write better, so I can communicate better.
That's awesome.
You know, so I can help myself. You know, they say the power of the pen and the paper, you know, and it was hard to find that person or that law firm, you know. But I finally did eventually. You know, it's history, you know,
Yeah,
Innocence
smile.
Project. If you look at my case, it's so many things that just stink, you know.
Hmm.
Because a lot of this could have been stopped by just prosecutors just saying, wait a minute. We don't want to just send no one to jail. We want to send the right one to jail. I would like people to just go from day one in my case to till the conviction. That alone would make you just, as my auntie says, shocked and appalled.
Wow. All right, so that is the story of Jerry Miller and his exoneration after serving nearly 25 years, 24 years in the Illinois prison system for crimes that he did not commit. And the only thing that put him away was the eyewitness testimony of two individuals who misidentified someone. It just goes to show that your individual memories, when these situations are occurring, you don't always remember what people look like. And just because you might remember doesn't mean that this guy did it. He just might look similar. And there was no proof whatsoever that this guy actually did it in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. And it looks like he might have been railroaded by police. But, anyways, I haven't looked at all the case information. I'm just saying, from what we've talked about here, it seems like he might have been a little bit railroaded or something along those lines. Anyways, remember, eyewitness statements aren't that credible, so everyone's memory is not that great. And every time you remember the memory, it's you remembering the last time you remember the memory. So you could be remembering it the way you wanted to remember it and not the way that it actually happened. So it's scary that someone could go to prison for 25 years based on eyewitness testimony of other people, when we know now how unreliable our own memories can be, especially in traumatic, high pressure situations like that would have been. So, anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think about this case, about Jerry Miller and his exoneration, being in prison for 25 years. Do you know of any other people that have been wrongfully convicted that you would like me to discuss? Please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care. If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeandcourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.